chapter 10, we are going to talk about law and due process. Law and due process. Some of this will be a little bit of a repeat from chapter 9, but we're going to get into more of policy issues. So we'll talk about civil law, and then we'll talk about some policy issues. We'll talk about crimes and elements of crimes and causes of crimes. We'll talk about the concept of due process. Due process is guaranteed in the United States Constitution through the 5th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and is also guaranteed in the Texas Amendment. So we are covered on many fronts. We also will evaluate punishment and rehabilitation policies, and then we will end there. We won't do the apply section. So this is a bit of a review. Criminal cases. Criminal cases are prosecuted or brought or initiated and shepherded through the entire process by public officials. The district attorney or county attorney is an elected official, and then we have several government employees that actually bring the case. The goal of any criminal case is to punish someone for breaking a written down law. You cannot punish someone for doing something that the law doesn't say that they can't do. It's a lot of negatives, but I think y'all understand what I mean. Civil law. Civil law is brought by an entity, either a person or a company or even a government, to seek redress for a harm that has been caused to that person or business or entity or governmental entity. Usually you are seeking compensation, money, for damages that you personally received. I lost some money, I lost some reputation because of what you did, and I need you to give me that money back to make me whole. And so civil cases are brought by a person, business, or government. That individual is called the plaintiff, and they file suit against the person that has to defend their actions. That person is called the defendant. In criminal law, the person against whom proceedings are proceeding or going is called the defendant as well. So let's talk about the types of civil law. So first we have, and this is a pretty good list, family law. Family law involves issues with the family relationship. That's probably the easiest way to say it. So I'm going to give you kind of a list. This is something that I know well because I practiced family law for quite some time. Family law, divorce, child custody, child support, name change, adoption, and really under the Texas code, juvenile law is family. Any termination of the parental relationship through Family and Protective Services or CPS is going to be a family law matter because that is dealing with the family relationship. So we have family courts. I believe there are 5 in Tarrant County, and their job is to look at these type of cases. These are all district courts. Real estate law has to do with property and the sale and ownership of land, of actual land. Sometimes there are structures on it, but it involves land, real estate. Probate. Probate law, it involves someone that is not able to speak for themselves. So that is going to be, you deal with the property rights of a person that is, we'll just say, incapacitated. So that person could be, have passed away. That person could be underage, like a guardianship. That person could be, have mental um, issues like Alzheimer's or dementia. That person could have a low IQ that is not allowing them to make decisions, and they need someone else to be in charge of their estate. That person could be incarcerated, and so there are issues that need to be taken care of, but they are not able to physically be there to do these things for themselves. That person could be mentally ill to a degree that they are being committed to a mental institution, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So all of those involve dealing with a person's property rights that is not able or does not have the capacity to do it for themselves. All of those are probate law. Business regulations, those have to do with companies, whether they are sole proprietorships or limited partnerships or corporations or limited liability companies. I think those are all of the different designations that you can have in Texas. And so it has to do with regulating the business and what the business can and can't do. Then there is corporate law that has to do with the business itself and issues for or against the business. So not just regulation, but issues for and against. Contract law. Contract law involves, a contract is a bargain for exchange. I feel like I'm in law school and I'm in contract law. I can just hear my professor saying that. Is a bargain for exchange. Two entities decide that they are going to agree to do something, and they are both going to agree to give something, and that is binding. It can be verbal, it can be written, but it is an agreement where at least two entities agree to give something in exchange for something. And when someone doesn't keep up their end of the bargain, when they say that they're going to give something but they don't, that is called a breach of contract. And it can get sticky and messy, but it has to do with an agreement between at least two entities. And then there are torts. Torts are the most, I'm gonna say, fun. We'll say the sexiest. Torts are when someone has, or some entity has caused a great harm. So a tort is an actual injury to a person. So when you see Brian Longcar talking about, have you been injured in an accident? The accident is a tort. When a company like in West, about 7 years ago now, a company had not been maintaining their what do you call it? Shoot. These are jarts. A company thought that this would be a great idea for a toy for children. It was marketed to children and a game of fun and skill for all ages. So literally what came in the package was these huge weighted darts that and two hoops. So you stood at one hoop and you put the other hoop on the other side and on the other side of the yard, and you threw these and tried to get them into the hoop. As you can imagine, um, millions of complaints started to come in because children and people were being impaled by these sharp objects that were being thrown across the yard. Um, so the company eventually stopped selling them, and the company was sued, and they were sued by hundreds of people. And and so they, number one, they got what's called an injunction, something saying stop selling them and get them back. And number two, they had to pay the medical bills for people. And in addition to all of that, they had to pay for just being negligent. Who would not anticipate that young people might not or might actually be hurt by sharp objects flying through the yard? And so they got what was called punitive damages in addition to, and punitive means punishing. So they had to pay for the pain and suffering and for just being grossly negligent in their design and in their marketing. And that often happens. You remember, oh, you won't remember because y'all are young. There was a case, and this may have been when I was in college or even when I was in law school. So it was the 90s. But a lady sued McDonald's. She spilled her coffee. She had driven away. She spilled her coffee on herself in after she got it from McDonald's. And she had third-degree burns. And she sued McDonald's. Oh my gosh, people were up in arms. They're like, it's coffee. Coffee's hot. So many people would think that the suit would have been dismissed. It was not dismissed. Not only did the lady that sued win, she got punitive damages. So they had to pay her actual expenses and her attorney's fees, and they had to pay some extra. And what they found was that McDonald's was heating their coffee too much, and that the level of the coffee was just much higher than a lot of their competitors, and they were not giving warnings. So all of those, as you can see, this is a topic that I enjoy a lot. All of those are torts. Let's talk about tort reform. This is an issue that has been very popular with conservatives and Republicans and insurance companies, because insurance companies ultimately are the ones that are doing the payouts. Usually, if a doctor has insurance, a dentist has insurance, a chiropractor has insurance, eventually who's actually going to be paying is the insurance company. And so insurance companies have sought to have some cap on the amount of money that can be awarded when someone is found to be liable. And so they have campaigned, they have sought to get, insurance companies have sought to get people in office that agreed with them. They have sought to elect judges that agreed with them. They have lobbied Congress and have been very successful. We do have limits on the amount of money that a person can be awarded in several different categories. That is called tort reform. And we have it in Texas. So the biggest thing is if somebody was grossly negligent in how they treated you, in not doing their job, in not being competent enough, but saying that they were, there is a limit on how much money you can collect. And as you can imagine, attorneys that represent plaintiffs that have been harmed don't like this at all. They don't want any limits on how much can be collected if somebody was negligent. But right now we do have it in Texas. Another issue in civil law that comes up quite a bit, and we'll talk about when we get to local governments, is the concept of eminent domain. Eminent domain is in the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution and in the Texas Constitution. And basically the concept is this. If a governmental entity needs your property for public use, so a highway, an easement, so that they're building a highway, but they need some extra space so that it won't be too close to anyone's home, to build a public hospital, to build something public, then they can declare that they need your property. And the response is from you if they actually say eminent domain, we are taking your property for public use, is not yes or no, you can have it. The answer is, how much are you going to pay me for it? They cannot just take a person's personal property. Most of the time we're talking real estate. They cannot just take your property without giving you, and these are the words from the Constitution, just and right compensation. So they have to pay you. They have to pay you the fair market value. Sometimes there are arguments about how much it should be, how much you should be awarded. Should you be awarded the value of your property now? Should you be awarded the value of your property when they put whatever they're going to put on it? And so there have been some classic battles. In Dallas, there were a lot of battles. In Arlington, there have been some battles. In North Richland Hills, there have been some battles about what value should be placed on the property, the present value or the future value. Most of the time, they decide the present value. All right, let's talk about crime. Let's talk about crimes. Every crime has elements. And in Texas, this is the way we set it up. There are really 3 categories of crimes that we are going to discuss. Again, every crime is written down somewhere. It has to be written down somewhere that you can't do this. And those fall into the categories of felonies and misdemeanors. And then there are the victimless crimes. It's not necessarily another category, but there are those things that the only person that is hurt is maybe you, and sometimes not anyone at all, but there is a law written saying that you can't do it. So we're going to start with felonies, and we're going to go from the top. The top type of felony, this is the worst that you can possibly get in the state of Texas, and that is capital murder. And so some examples of capital murder murder of a police officer, a firefighter, prison guard, some public servant, a child younger than the age of 6, murder for hire, murder committed while you are committing another felony, and mass murder. In Texas, capital murder can get executed. You can be killed by the state if you are convicted of a capital murder. The other choice is life in prison without the possibility of parole. If you'll recall from chapter 9, these types of crimes, if you were convicted of a capital murder, those are automatically appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeals and reviewed. There are also many challenges that you can make to the validity, and there's usually a very long period of time between the time that someone is convicted of a capital murder and the time that it is actually carried out. Texas does lead the nation in the number of people that are executed in the state, and disproportionately the people that do receive execution are male, minority, and poor. And that is still the case. All right, so less than a capital murder is first-degree felony. Some examples: aggravated sexual assault, theft of money or property greater than $200,000, robbery, murder, sale of more than 4 grams of hard drugs. Love it. The punishment, 5 to 99 years. There's a very wide range that you're dealing with. And the maximum fine for a first-degree felony, $10,000. Lower than a first-degree felony, second-degree felony. Theft of money or property greater than $100,000, burglary of a habitation. The punishment range is 2 to 20 years, and the maximum fine is $10,000. Lower than a second-degree felony, third-degree felony. Theft of money or property greater than $20,000, so $20,000 to $99,099, $999.99. There we go. Drive-by shootings, involuntary manslaughter. 2 to 10 is the range, maximum fine $10,000. Lowest type of felony is a state jail felony. But if they ask you if you've ever been convicted of a felony and it was a state jail felony, you still have to say yes. So greater than $1,500, so between $1,500 and $20,000, burglary of a building other than a habitation, sale of less than a gram of narcotics, auto theft, forgery. The punishment is 180 days or 6 months to 2 years, and the punishment is meted out in a state jail, not prison. All right, I am going to start at the bottom for misdemeanors. So Class C misdemeanor is what can be heard in municipal courts and JP courts. Class C misdemeanors are theft of money or property less than $50, smoking in a public elevator, speeding, disorderly conduct, a fighting ticket, truancy ticket. Tickets is what you should be thinking in your head. There's no call for jail time for a Class C misdemeanor, although you can get jail time for failing to appear. You cannot get jail time as a punishment for the misdemeanor, and the maximum fine is $500. Next up is Class B misdemeanors. This is theft of property from $500 to $499, possession of small amounts of marijuana, which I still think is horrible, reckless conduct, such as pointing a gun at someone. So you can get from 6 months up to 6 months in county jail for a Class B misdemeanor and a fine of up to $2,000. So this is nothing to sneeze at. These are of consequence. The top type of misdemeanor is a Class A misdemeanor. This is theft of money or property greater than $500, and see, it's going to be from $500 to $14.99. Driving while intoxicated is a Class A misdemeanor. Resisting arrest is a Class A misdemeanor. Stalking is a Class A misdemeanor. You can get up to a year in county jail for a Class A misdemeanor and a fine of up to $4,000. So Class C misdemeanors, $500 is something on your record. None of these, most of the time, there are no questions on a questionnaire about have you been convicted of a misdemeanor. Although I have seen lots of job applications asking if you have been convicted of a misdemeanor other than a Class C misdemeanor. So I have started to see more and more that they're asking about misdemeanors and not just felonies on applications. So, this is always thorny for me. Why or who are criminals? Well, I guess we can say these are people that are failing to accept that they shouldn't do things that are written down in a code that says that they can't do it. So in that way, this is a person that is failing to accept social values, values that are placed on them by our lawmakers. Disproportionately, the people that get convicted of crimes are young. They are less financially well off, and disproportionately, this has been borne out on by many metrics, racial or ethnic minority groups. If there is anyone under the sound of my voice that thinks that members of racial and ethnic minority groups just commit more crimes, then there are a lot of reasons why members of racial or ethnic minority groups are more likely to be convicted of crimes. I don't think that is because of some type of moral depravity or even committing more crimes. Now, maybe if there's a financial element, I can see that society has not been giving you what you need, or you need something immediately, and you are much more likely to commit crimes, sometimes for just self-preservation, sometimes out of frustration. That I can 100% see. But our Phi Theta Kappa chapter just did a project where we were looking at the perceptions of police, and if you would like to hear that program, please email me and I'll get you a copy of the finished copy of the program, because what they came up with was very interesting. But there were police officers that had been surveyed that were saying these people just commit more crimes. They just commit. There's just in the minority areas of town, these are just people that are more likely to commit crimes. And it hurt my heart. It hurt my heart to hear that and to read that, because there is, of course, much more to it. Now, I think that it is safe to say that males are much more likely to be involved in criminal activity and certainly charged and convicted of criminal activity. African Americans and Hispanics are much more likely to be charged and convicted, and those with low income or low education are much more likely to be involved. Um, so if we look at statistics of people that are in our county, state, and state jails and prisons, you will see a pattern. There is much more people are in much closer proximity. There are a lot more that are from cities. There is a big connection between drug addiction and conviction. There is, I don't know about access to weapons, because one would argue that people in rural areas have much more access to weapons, but it's really the attitude about the weapons and what they're for that makes the big difference. And a white collar crime is one that does not involve violence. Usually it involves some type of business dealing, embezzlement, and that's the only one that comes to my mind at the moment. But like Madoff, the guy that was taking people's money and telling them that they were investing, and he was going to increase their money, and then he was just using it, and people lost millions while he got rich. Let's talk about the victims of crimes. And actually, there is some correlation between the committers of crimes and victims. The highest rate of victimization occurs in the poor sections of cities, urban areas. And more crimes, especially the violent crimes, they often happen between people that know each other or know of each other, neighborhoods, against friends and families. Victims have the right to be informed of investigations, of court proceedings, and if someone is convicted, even when they are going to be let out. That is a part of the Texas Constitution. We have a very robust victims' rights section in the Texas Bill of Rights, and the Texas Attorney General's office has a victims relief fund that you can tap into, and that's really kind of all that the AG has to do with anything criminal. But if you have been a victim of a crime and you were not awarded reimbursement of some type from the criminal court, you can apply to the Attorney General's office to get crime victims compensation. So an index crime is one of 8 crimes that the Federal Bureau of Investigation combines to produce something called the Annual Crime Index. So they take statistics and information from law enforcement, local and state law enforcement, and they include willful homicide, forcible rape, robbery, burglary, aggravated assault, larceny over $50, we call it theft in Texas, motor vehicle theft, and arson. So those are the index crimes that the FBI requires law enforcement to track and report, and they keep the numbers for. And so if we're looking at Texas, in general, index crimes have gone down, and violent crime has remained relatively steady. We saw a dip in 2014 and then a little rise. And so, but violent crimes have remained relatively steady. Index crimes have decreased a great deal. All right, let's talk about the due process of law. And if you think about it, due means that this is what you are owed. Process is the steps that are taken to, in this instance, charge you and convict you of a crime. So let's start with, and basically, our Constitution requires that anyone in law enforcement, whether that be the law enforcement officers or the prosecutors, they have to go through certain steps. And if they miss anything along the way, then you should not be convicted of a crime. So we'll start from the beginning. When they look at you and say, I think that this person is doing something that is against the law, that is called probable cause. And you cannot be arrested. You cannot have your home searched unless there is enough evidence to believe that it is highly probable that a crime has been committed or that some piece of evidence is going to be found in your home. So it's a pretty high bar, and the law enforcement officers have to go to a judge and let them know what they saw, what they heard, what they observed that leads them to believe that they're going to find X, Y, and Z in your home. If at any point along the way, if a police officer goes into your home and they did not get a warrant based on probable cause, if you were detained and you should not have been, anything that is out of the ordinary, that doesn't comply with the stated laws and rules and common law, if they obtain evidence that is incriminating, it cannot be used against you in a court of law. Now, I keep tripping over it because we are, I hope, very familiar with Miranda warnings. Miranda warnings are simply a manifestation of the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. Fifth Amendment says that you cannot be forced to be a witness against yourself, that so you can and should be able to refuse to talk to police, to law enforcement officers, so because it's not just police. You are entitled to an attorney. The Sixth Amendment says you're entitled to an attorney at trial, but you are also entitled to have an attorney present if you decide that you are going to talk to the police before a trial. If you were denied that right, so Miranda rights say if you can have an attorney, if you can't afford an attorney, and one will be assigned to you even before the trial. That's Sixth Amendment. All of it. If they talk to you and didn't tell you that you didn't have to talk to them, if they go into your house and they didn't have a proper warrant, none of it can be used against you. None of it can be used against you. That is called the exclusionary rule. If you are arrested, it has to be either because a warrant was obtained, and a warrant has to be based on probable cause, or because you were observed committing a crime. Those are the only two where an arrest is proper. All right. So you have been arrested and you have been and so there has been some probable cause built up. The next step is something called the arraignment. Arraignment. And that is where you go in front of a judge, and this is also a guarantee of the Texas and the United States Constitution. You find out exactly what you're being charged with. You are they again explain that you have the right to an attorney, and they set bail, and that bail has to be reasonable. It has to fit the crime. It has to take into account what you can pay, and it has to reflect the seriousness or lack of seriousness of the crime that you are being charged with. All of this happens formally in court, and you decide whether you are going to plead guilty or plead not guilty. So that is an arraignment. Arraignment. So if the prosecutor is hesitant to charge you with a crime. We talked about this extensively in chapter 9, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about grand juries, but there is in Texas a vehicle for having citizens decide whether or not you will be charged with the crime. If they say yes, then that is a true bill. If they say there's not enough evidence, then that is a no bill. And that's a no bill. A pretrial hearing is where you go in front of the judge and the prosecutor presents their evidence, and the judge decides whether there's enough evidence to actually charge you with a crime. So the judge kind of acts as the grand jury in that instance. And then in Texas and all over the world, we allow you to negotiate. So you can plead guilty or you can plead no contest and take a lesser punishment and say, I don't need a trial. I don't need all that. I am just going to say that I committed something, maybe not what you charged me with, and I will agree to do X, Y, and Z. All of that is taken in front of the judge, and the judges, they explain to the judge, we won't be having a trial. We've already decided, we've come to an agreement about what the person is going to be convicted of and what their punishment is going to be. The judge can accept it or not accept it. You have the ability all the way up until that time to change your mind and say, I don't want to do it. There's enough controversy in the state of Texas to accept this part. Sometimes, especially if someone has a court-appointed attorney that is not getting paid a whole bunch of money and doesn't really feel like dealing with it, sometimes they are told, people are told, you're not going to get anything better. And so sometimes, even when people have not committed crimes, they agree because they don't want to go to jail for longer. And when Dallas County was doing their basically Innocence Project work, they got some funding and they started going and checking the DNA of people that were in prison. Many of them had gone on plea bargain. They were finding out that there was a significant percentage of men, mostly African American, that had gone to jail on plea bargains that had not committed the crime, could not have committed the crime. So in a way, if you did it and you are able to save the money and the time to get a lesser sentence because you are saving the state money, I'm all for it. But when a person gets railroaded into accepting something because they don't think that they can get anything better, there are all kinds of problems with that. All right, but let's say that you did decide that you wanted a trial. There's a couple of choices in Texas. You can have a trial by jury. This is anywhere actually, because this is guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment. You can have a trial by jury, or you can have a bench trial. Bench is in front of the judge. If you choose a trial by jury, it is a nice process. We talked about petit juries in chapter 9. Voir dire, and that I'm sure is not how you pronounce it, but I'm from Texas, and that's how my criminal justice professor pronounced it. Voir dire, I think it's voir dire, is where you get to answer questions, you get to ask questions of jurors and weed them out and either strike them for cause because they said that they can't be impartial, or strike them because you just don't think that they'll be a good juror. So the adversary process, in English-speaking countries, there are two contesting parties. They present their opposing views and their evidence in a court of law, and that is how we decide in criminal law and in civil law. That is how we decide matters. So once you actually get to trial, if you have a jury, they're going to listen to all of the evidence, and then the judge will explain to them what the law is and explain to them what they have to decide. That is called the jury charge. And if you are convicted or if you're not, they basically come and announce, we find the defendant not guilty, or we find the defendant guilty, and of what. If you are found guilty, then you are sentenced. So they tell you what your punishment is going to be. Now, another reason that plea bargaining is so popular is because we allow the sentence to be probated. If you are on probation, you have been convicted of a crime, and you technically are supposed to serve it in jail or prison. But we allow you to serve that sentence outside of the confines of a prison with certain restrictions. So you are under confinement. You are not having to actually go to jail as long as you follow the steps. So they'll tell you you can't meet with other people that have been convicted of crimes. You usually can't have a weapon. You can't go certain places. It just depends on what you were convicted of. But you are going to serve that sentence walking around among the people with liberty and not in jail. If anything irregular happened during the trial and you believe that there was a problem with the way that the law was applied or something that the judge did, you can always appeal the case to an appellate court. So the discussion board is about Ethan Couch, and we have this system in Texas. It is not this way everywhere, but in Texas, if the person is under 17, then there is an opportunity to not take them through the criminal justice system, but to take them through the juvenile system. These are civil proceedings. You do not have a criminal record. they don't even use the same words. You are not found guilty. You are adjudicated delinquent. You are not on probation. You are on community supervision. You are not in jail. You are detained. And the punishments are very different. It is the system is designed to help a young person get back to regular life. There are many chances. There's a lot of reform, and at the top of the types of, they don't even call it punishments, treatments basically, there is a juvenile justice prison system. It is called Texas Youth Commission, or TYC. In Texas, if you are 13 years old, they can make a decision that you will be tried as an adult. So you will have a criminal record if you're convicted. You'll go to the criminal courts. You'll go through a trial. If the court decides that the crime was serious enough that you need to be tried as an adult and not have the advantages of the juvenile justice system. There's a lot of controversy about the concept of actually having someone 14 years old being tried as an adult. Enough statistics have shown that children that are tried as adults are much more likely to commit future crimes than if they are dealt with in the juvenile justice system. And so there's a question about whether we should be doing this. But then you see people like Ethan Couch, who killed, 2 people or 4 people, and caused permanent physical harm to another one, and went through the juvenile justice system. So there is, just like all the other statistics, minorities, males, and the poor are much more likely to not get the advantages of the juvenile justice system, but to start early and have those criminal convictions and criminal record and criminal records. So punishment for felonies: you can get a probated sentence. You can actually go to prison. You can go to prison and then actually be physically let out. So you are incarcerated, but they are going to let you serve out some of your sentence outside. It is very similar to probation, but probation, you never actually have been to prison. Parole, you have been to prison and you've been let out early. It is not automatically granted. But it takes less of a toll on the prison system. We spend a lot of money on criminal punishment and housing those that have been charged and convicted of crimes in Texas. We do have the ability to grant clemency in the state. You can get a pardon, which you get a pardon, you can legally say, I have never been convicted of a felony. It wipes it off completely from your record. You can have your sentence commuted, meaning that they reduce your punishment and allow you to go free, but it is still on your record. And then there is the temporary reprieve that the governor can give you if you have been sentenced to the death penalty. A governor can give you a 30-day reprieve, saying that they can't actually put you to death for 30 days while something is being investigated. For misdemeanors, most of the time we're talking about fines. There are not a whole bunch of people in county jails for serving out sentences for misdemeanors. Most of the time you're going to get probation. The point is that they want you to stop doing it. And the question is, are we going through the proper steps to make sure that people don't do it again? Someone that habitually and continually commits crimes and gets convicted of crimes is called a recidivist. Are we in Texas doing enough to stop people from habitually committing crimes? Are we addressing the real issue? It's a real question. Let's just take a look. And I'm not sure what year this is from. This is actually 2016 data published in April of 2018. Prisoners. Federal, 50 states, Texas. Texas is number 7 in the amount of people that are, and this is in prison, on probation, or on parole per 100,000. So prisoners, 53 federal, 50 states, 397, Texas 563. On probation, 7 federal, and to be honest with you, there is much less there are much fewer criminal procedures in federal government, but be that as it may, federal 7, states 50 states 1459, Texas 1805. On parole, we're in prison but we're allowing you to walk around, 46 federal, 303 states, 50 states, Texas 537. Texas punishes people for crimes at much higher rates. We are ranked 7 in the amount of people that are in prison, 10th in the amount of people that are on probation, 5th in the amount of people that are on parole. There is a true debate. There are about 29 states that still allow the death penalty. Federal government does, the military does as well. Texas leads all in every category on the amount of people that get the death penalty and the amount of people that are put to death. It is a very controversial issue. The Supreme Court over and over again has said that it is not cruel and unusual punishment to put someone to death. And Texas believes that it is a fit punishment. There's no death penalty case that doesn't go to a jury, and so this kind of reflects how the people in Texas feel, because you cannot have a judge sentence someone to death after a lot of legal wrangling over the years. The Supreme Court will not allow judges to sentence someone to death or to even hear a capital murder crime. It has to be a jury. So then there's always this question. If we're finding out that there are people that have been convicted that didn't commit crimes, how many people that fall into that category have we put to death? How much, if we're talking pure finances, does it cost more to keep someone in prison for life or to go through the legal proceedings and complete a death? I have seen enough studies to show that financially it actually is more expensive to give someone the death penalty, hold them in confinement, and actually put them to death. In Texas, we have stopped allowing our people that are put to death to choose a last meal and the Board of Pardons and Paroles, or the Bureau of Prisons, actually cut it out when the gentleman, the guy that was convicted of killing killing Bird in Jasper, picked him up on the side of the road and tied him to a rope and drug him in a truck because he was black. He ordered, oh gosh, steaks and hamburgers and ice cream and pie. The list just went on and on and on, and then didn't eat it because he just didn't think that he should be put to death, and that was his final protest, and that was the last time that someone that was being put to death was allowed to get a meal. I personally don't exactly know how I feel about it. I think that it should be only the most egregious if we're going to do it. And that Texas really needs to examine why we are so much higher than other states. And I will leave it there.